He made his only daughter walk down the aisle toward a groom who had died 3 days earlier. Because apparently politics don't stop just because the bridegroom's heart does. She swore she smelled the decay even through the beeswax, myrrh, and powdered rose root the royal embalmers kept packing into Prince Leonid's nostrils. A wax mask painted the exact unhealthy pink of a man who'd never see sunrise again clung to the corpse's face. The Tsar called it a miracle of devotion. The court physicians whispered it was just enough craftsmanship to stop the stiffened lips from cracking before the priest said, "Amen." Either way, the rings were blessed, the candles burned, and everyone pretended not to notice the flies circling like dirty gossip above the holy icons. Why bother with such spectacle? Because Leonid Volkonsky, dead or not, controlled half the grain flowing into Moscow. 2 winters of bad harvests had already pushed the capital toward bread riots. One more, and the Kremlin's walls would be pelted with frozen turnips instead of snowballs. Marrying the Tsar's daughter to the boyar's heir, even post-mortem, cemented a contract older than any pulse. If the church balked, the Tsar reminded its metropolitans how flammable monastery roofs could be during a surprise inspection. By dawn, the Archbishop of Novgorod had agreed to sprinkle holy water on anything that didn't actively bite him. So they dressed Leonid in cloth of gold, stitched shut the places where death had already leaked, tied him upright with silk ribbons to a chair hidden beneath the brocade, and set him beside the trembling Tsarevna Vasilisa. She wore sea-green velvet because the court astrologer insisted such color calmed disturbed spirits. It did nothing for living nerves. Her attendants watched her fingers shake, each tremor chipping fresh emerald enamel off her nails. The Tsar interpreted her pallor as maidenly modesty. The ladies-in-waiting knew it was the terror of giving marital vows to a man whose jaw had been wired shut to keep it from falling off mid-ceremony. When the priest began the liturgy, his voice quavered between syllables. "Christ is risen," he mumbled, then gulped at the irony. He'd been ordered to read the same text used for Easter Mass because the Tsar insisted. What was a marriage to a corpse if not a small resurrection? Everyone laughed politely, no one louder than the monks, strong enough to heft Leonid's inert bulk down the aisle. 2 slipped vertebrae and 1 hernia. Later, the relic of a groom was standing at the altar like a puppet whose strings were made of embalmer's twine. Outside, commoners traded wagers on how many hours the prince's head would stay straight before gravity betrayed the performance. Inside, Vasilisa repeated, "I do," so quietly that even God might have missed it. It didn't matter. The Tsar was already waving musicians to strike up a polonaise. The newlywed widow, word order mattered little in a room that smelled of both incense and slow rot, was expected to dance. Instead, witnesses saw her pinch the underside of Leonid's lacquered hand, as though testing whether wax behaved like flesh. Nothing moved. Legend claims she whispered, "Thank you for having the decency to not object." Dry humor blooms in strange soils. But wait, it gets weirder. Marriage, as the Orthodox court understood it, required consummation. A living groom was optional. The appearance of tradition was not. So the royal physicians prescribed the nuptial vigil. At midnight, they wheeled the corpse, still dressed, now wilting, into Vasilisa's bridal chamber. 4 nuns hovered behind a curtain reciting psalms to discourage poltergeists. On a side table sat a quill and ink. The Tsar required a written statement by dawn, swearing that bride and bridegroom had shared solitary time, in a Christian manner. What that euphemism meant when one participant was legally past discussion didn't trouble bureaucrats. Paperwork demands ink, not accuracy. The vigil lasted 7 hours. A Polish envoy later noted that guards posted outside heard no sound except occasional sobs and the scrape of a chair leg against cedar floorboards. When the bell of Archangel Cathedral tolled prime, Vasilisa emerged wearing the red-edged veil reserved for married women and widows alike. "It is done," she said. Whether she referred to the paperwork or her remaining innocence, no one asked. Curiosity kills not just cats, but anyone within scything distance of a paranoid Tsar. If the ceremony had ended there, it might have faded into footnote territory alongside three-headed calves and comets shaped like crosses. Instead, the Tsar doubled down on absurdity. He pronounced that Vasilisa, though technically a widow, was still bound to her new family's estates. She would move into the Volkonsky Palace on the Volga, manage the grain convoys, and attend court every Easter bearing a bouquet for her husband. Talk about commitment. Nothing says eternal love like synchronized decomposition. Clergy protested. Canon law insisted that marriage dies with the body. The Tsar countered with a perfectly medieval loophole. Leonid's spirit lingered. Therefore, the bond endured. And if a few priests found themselves reassigned to monasteries north of the Arctic Circle, well, miracles require sacrifices. Life in the Volkonsky Palace proved equal parts privilege and morbid comedy. The servants, terrified of offending the dead master, spoke to his portrait before making decisions. "My lord, shall we sell grain at 6 kopecks a sack?" Silence, of course, signified consent. Vasilisa kept a ledger. She turned out to be brilliant at logistics, negotiating winter prices that saved entire provinces from famine. Rumor credited the success to nightly conferences with Leonid's ghost. In truth, she consulted the estate's steward, an elderly Tatar eunuch, who understood the volatility of both markets and monarchs. Yet grief, or its forced parody, took tolls. Each anniversary, the Tsar dispatched fresh clothes for Leonid's corpse, which had been interred in a stone crypt beneath the palace chapel. Tailors slit the back seams of velvet caftans so the stiff body could be slipped inside. Parish youths were paid to rotate the prince's position, so he may enjoy the seasons. They complained the smell clung for days. One joked that sainthood seemed less aromatic than the icons promised. 3 years after the wedding, plague swept the Volga basin. Superstition blamed unquiet dead. Peasants pointed at the crypt and muttered that a bridegroom who never drew breath after wedlock had cheated both church and plague angel alike. Vasilisa, trapped between her father's decree and the mob's fear, ordered the tomb sealed with molten lead. "If the prince wishes to walk," she reportedly said, "he must now learn to melt metal." Was it humor or resignation? Chroniclers disagree. What survives on parchment rarely catches tone. The Tsar, miles away, was busy inventing fresh cruelties. He drowned one governor for misstating tax revenue, boiled another for mispronouncing his title, then decided the kingdom needed a new, saintly relic to inspire obedience. Guess whose embalmed spouse he wanted exhumed for veneration? Vasilisa finally snapped. She sent a letter, still preserved in Moscow's archives, arguing that canonizing a political marriage would cheapen heaven. She signed it, "Your loyal daughter, who has already married death once. She will not wed it twice." Miraculously, the Tsar relented. Perhaps even tyrants recognize a line between terrifying and ridiculous, and Leonid's body had long crossed it. He shifted focus to conquering Livonia, leaving Vasilisa alone to manage grain and ghosts. She adopted the title Knyagina Regent, a polite fiction disguising real authority. Merchants found in her a patron who kept roads patrolled and thieves hanging from birch trees, efficient if occasionally grisly. Starving monks called her an angel. Disgruntled boyars muttered witch. Either way, bread prices stabilized, and Moscow's streets stopped echoing with hunger riots. Years rolled. The Tsar's health wavered, paranoia bloomed like mildew, and foreign ambassadors carried home tales of a kingdom simultaneously barbaric and bewilderingly effective, thanks, many noted, to a widow who'd never been a wife. One English trader compared her to a lighthouse erected atop a coffin. Dry, but it stuck. On the 17th anniversary of the corpse wedding, Vasilisa rode back to Moscow, ostensibly to celebrate her father's 52nd name day. Secretly, she intended to negotiate her own release from the matrimonial farce. She entered the throne room in black damask, the color for both dowagers and protesters, and placed Leonid's wedding ring on the Tsar's ledger. "Your Majesty," she said, "I have fulfilled my vows. The state is fed, the Volkonsky line honored, and no one can claim the alliance failed. Let the dead keep the ring. I reclaim my life." Witnesses expected thunder. Instead, the Tsar laughed, a bark of a sound that startled even his Oprichniki bodyguards. Perhaps he realized that keeping a daughter chained to a corpse was more grotesque than glorious. Perhaps he merely admired her audacity. Either way, he granted release on one condition: she'd enter a convent, ensuring no rival dynasty married her blood. Freedom. Russian style. Vasilisa accepted. In the convent of the Ascension, she orchestrated hospital kitchens, copied sermons into vernacular so peasants could understand them, and quietly funded dowries for orphan girls. Living ones. Records describe nuns giggling when she quipped, "Better a girl married to a living drunk than to a polished cadaver." Dry humor has a habit of blooming in the soil of experience. She died at 62, peacefully, the rarest fate of her brutal century. At her request, no relics were taken, no finger bones paraded as miracles. She wanted to meet God unembellished. The abbess placed a slice of rye bread on her coffin lid, symbolic thanks for the grain she delivered to hungry millions. Somewhere, perhaps, Leonid's corpse still sat in its lead-sealed crypt, forgotten luggage from a journey no one wants to remember. And yet, the tale survives, a whispered lesson that power can twist ritual into theater until the living merely prop up agendas the way ribbons once propped up a dead prince. Modern contracts still marry companies to founders long after their hearts stop. Politicians still brandish wedding photos to sell alliances, and daughters, yes, they still stand at altars wondering whom they're really pledging to. We've replaced beeswax masks with smiling press releases, but the scent of expediency over sanity? That never quite fades.